Well, I had known about this problem in the abortion industry for many years. I wrote a book called Line 5 back in 1996, and we had a whole chapter on it. And what gave us the idea originally was that we were doing a lot of malpractice cases against the abortion industry, and when we'd be interviewing these women who'd been injured or sometimes killed, and we'd be interviewing the survivors, we would find out that, they'd be saying, oh, by the way, while I was there, this sexually inappropriate thing happened, or he raped me, or he did whatever. So we've known about this for a long time. And like I said, we wrote about it back in 1996. Well, I guess theoretically you could say we've been working on it since 1994, 95 when we started doing the research for Line 5. But when we decided to redo it, would say probably 2 years, a year and a half, something like that.
Something like that, yeah. It was lengthy.
It was lengthy because these things are well hidden. They're very hard to find, and we know that when we were looking for them and researching these, and Renee was the primary one who did that, they're very buried. They're very hard to find.
The media does a very good job covering up.
The media covers up for them very, very well. And for example, the biggest problem that we've seen is you have a guy that's accused, and he's raped or sexually assaulted women, and the media knows that this is a PR nightmare for their buddies in the abortion industry. So they don't identify him as an abortionist. They just identify him as a local doctor. They don't say that he works at Planned Parenthood. They just say he works at a local clinic. And so when you're doing the research then, they're invisible to you. You can type in a Google search or whatever, abortion clinic, abortionist, whatever, and it's never going to pop up. And the only way you can find them is like what Renee would have to do, is look at it and say, I just have a gut feeling this guy's an abortionist, and then start really digging into him. And that's why we know we have tons of guys that we didn't include that we know are abortionists. We just couldn't dig far enough to find them. Well, things have changed since I wrote Line 5. Now you've got the Me Too movement, and you've got all this new attention that's coming to the issue of what I call institutional sexual assault, where you have a whole industry that's involved in covering up for the people inside the industry that are doing this. And we see this in the entertainment industry, we see it in the news industry, we see it in the Catholic Church, we see it in other churches. And so I think the timing is better for it now. And so we decided that let's go forward, bring this out again, update the information so we can show that it's still going on. It's been going on for decades. But now there's more attention being paid to it because there's more organizations out there talking about it. The interesting thing is a lot of those organizations are pro-abortion, and they're not jumping onto this bandwagon like they did onto the Catholic Church or the news and entertainment industry.
Well, right now I feel like it's the right time for this, as well as because social media is so, everybody's using social media, whether it's Facebook or Twitter, Instagram, and this is coming to light. Other issues in the abortion industry have come to light, such as the child predator or whatever it may be, and people are not talking about rape or sexual abuse in the abortion clinics. And so right now is the right time for this, and I feel like it will get a whole lot of traction.
Yeah, and the point you make about social media is a really good one, because back in '96 there was no internet and there was no social media and all that stuff. And so the media that's on the side of the abortion industry in this thing, when we brought this stuff out, they just totally ignored it.
Oh, yeah.
But now they can't do that because we've got social media and we can get this out through other mechanisms. So this is the right timing for it. And I think you're going to see that it's going to explode here very shortly.
I think it's going to be eye-opening. I feel like that people are not aware of this issue in the abortion clinics and the abortion mills. They don't know that this is going on, and when they find out that it is through Line 5, they are astonished. They can't believe it. It's just such a surprise. So we've got new cases, and and there are still abortionists out there working, and so this is something that's going to be pretty big, I believe.
Well, that's a good point that you make there too, because one of the things that we discovered, basically you discovered it, you did the research on it, is how many of these guys are still working. And so you've got guys that have been convicted of this, that have criminal histories with it, that have lost their licenses in other states, and yet the abortion industry continues to employ them. And one of the things I think people need to be asking these people that operate these abortion mills, where one of these guys is working, currently working, saying, are you warning these women when you interview them for an abortion? Do you warn them, hey, the guy we're turning you over to now has a conviction for sexual assault?
And of course they don't.
And of course, you know they don't. I don't know how people will react. I know how I hope people will react. And I hope people will be outraged and say, if we're going to have a standard where we're going to go after, again, the Catholic Church, or people like Harvey Weinstein, or Bill Cosby, or Matt Lair, or all these other people going down the list that have been caught doing this stuff, congressmen and senators and so forth, if we're going to go after them, why would we let these abortionists off the hook? And so I'm hoping that they'll at least, if they're not outraged about it, at least they'll apply the same standard to these guys that do abortions as they do to all these other people and not let them off the hook.
Well, and also the millennial group, they are for injustice. They want to fight injustice. And this is an injustice right here that is going on. This should not be happening. And the Me Too movement, they come out and they're outraged about it. What about the abortionists that are doing this in the clinics? What about them?
And not only that, Renee, but when you look at the sheer number of victims, potential victims, 3,000 women are going to walk into abortion clinics today, and a certain number of them are going to be raped or sexually assaulted. There's going to be a lot more women sitting in abortion clinic waiting rooms today than are going to be sitting in a Hollywood producer's office trying to get a part in a movie where he might sexually abuse them or sexually harass them or rape them, whatever it might be. So the sheer numbers are astronomical in this, and so I hope people are outraged by it.
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. That's a short answer.
Yeah, the Me Too movement is out. Time's Up, which I know doesn't really focus on this, but no, the Women's March, absolutely not.
Because the one thing you do not do amongst these leftist women's groups is say anything negative about abortion, about abortionists, about the abortion industry, about abortion clinics. You know, I had somebody told us that, I can't remember who it was, told us this while we were doing this investigation. They said for people like the Me Too movement, or these women's groups that claim to care so much about women who are raped and sexually assaulted, they see the abortion clinics as a sanctuary city. Mm-hmm. And so yeah, no, nobody's gonna get involved in this, believe me.
I had a nightmare.
You had more than one.
I had several nightmares. I had nightmares of me being raped in an abortion clinic while aborting my child. It was not a pleasant project to work on, to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, I've been at this well over 35 years now, and I don't really know that there's a lot that I could hear from the abortion industry that would personally affect me anymore. I mean, I've gotten to the point in my life where nothing these people do shocks me or surprises me, or and I know that people around the office that have not been in this as long as I have, like Renee, somebody can come to us with something and it will sometimes really shock you or stun you or make you mad or whatever, and I know sometimes y'all look at me and think, he doesn't seem to get too worked up about any of this. I've heard it so long. You know, it doesn't personally affect me. Now, it may have affected you differently.
Any little thing just makes me want to fight harder for these women and the babies that are being ripped apart, basically, so.
I think for me, and I know this is probably even more so for Renee, if you've read the report, and we cleaned it up, it's a lot nastier if you read the actual supporting documents for it, the court cases and stuff. It's not pleasant sitting and talking. If it were another man, it wouldn't even be pleasant. But to sit and talk all day and have Renee come in and have to read these cases about what these animals did, it's unpleasant.
It's very uncomfortable. I feel like this is very personal, and I feel like this is information that if you're married, that only you and your spouse would discuss or talk about. So it is very uncomfortable.
And sometimes not even that. I mean, you and I had to discuss things in these cases that happened that I bet you and your husband have never talked about. You know, it's just not these sort of things just don't come up between normal people.
Yes.
And so I think that's part of it is that just there were times when we'd be working on this project, I'd go home at night thinking I need to take a sitz bath or something, you know, and you scrub the dirt off of me just hearing what these people are like.
That is very true.
The easy part is knowing that you're doing what's right, and that you say we're going to expose this, and so that women, hopefully, we can prevent this from happening to other women walking into these places. We're a pro-life group. We don't want them going in there for any reason. But if they're going to go in there, they at least need to know that, hey, there's a chance, because the kind of people that work at abortion clinics, there's a chance they could do something like this to you. So the easy part for me was just saying, hey, we're doing the right thing. We're gonna get this information out. But I don't know, there really was an easy part.
I don't really think that there was an easy part in this project. Even when these men are convicted, it's just a slap on the hand. So even that's not satisfying enough to say it was easy. When I contacted a victim in Michigan, and I was able to talk to her, and she was bawling and crying on the phone with me, and she said that was a really dark time in her life, and her husband now doesn't know about it, and she does not want to talk about it. She doesn't want anyone to know what had happened. And I prayed with her over the phone before I let her off, and I was supposed to get back in touch with her at 6 that evening, and it was a Friday night, and I called and I texted her, and she never did return my call. And so that was the last time I was able to contact her. But I know that she has turned her life around, and she said that she goes to church, she believes in God, and she knows what she did was wrong. I just pray that she has the strength to get the help that she needs, and she's able to talk to her family, or at least her husband, about this, just because it's freeing when you're able to do that.
Yeah, I hope she has the kind of husband that would be understanding if the time ever comes that she says, listen, I've got problems I need to sit down and talk with you about. That he's understanding and said, you know, that was that person, this is the person I'm married to now.
Right.
I would really encourage them to try to get healing over this, and to understand that, yes, in my view, you made a terrible decision to go into an abortion clinic to begin with. But if we set that aside and just look at the rape or sexual assault issue, that part was not your fault. Yes, you shouldn't have been in that environment, but the fact that you got raped or sexually assaulted was not your fault. And I can tell you, a lot of these women do believe that. I had a woman that we talked to several years ago when we were doing Line 5, the research for it, who, when I asked her about it, she said she didn't want to prosecute him for that. She had an injury that she wanted to sue for. And I said, well, why don't you want to do anything about that, about the sexual assault that you suffered? And she said, because I think I'm more guilty than he is. At least he didn't kill me. I killed my baby, but at least he didn't kill me. And she said, I think I'm more guilty than he is. And so I'm not going to sue him. And we need to get these women healed. There's a lot of abortion healing out there, even among women that has to take place, even among women who didn't get raped or sexually assaulted. But then you add this to it, and it makes that much worse. I guess the only thing that I think about that really kind of bothers me is I think about anytime you debate the pro-aborts, which I've done, of course, many, many thousands of times over the years that I've been doing this, and you start talking about protecting the unborn child, what they bring up is the issue of rape. And they'll say, oh, but what about a woman who's been raped? Are you going to make an exception for a woman that's raped? And how can you be so cold-blooded as to not allow abortion for a woman who's been the victim of rape or incest? And there was a time, and I even brought it up to Renee one day when we were looking at some data or something that you had brought to me. And I thought about that issue. And I thought about a woman, let's say, we know for a fact, for example, that only a tiny fraction of all the abortions are done on women who are pregnant through rape. The numbers vary from like 0.5% up to about 3% is about the maximum that anybody ever says. But let's just say that there's a woman out there who was raped and who did get pregnant and who did decide to have an abortion. She's already been traumatized, obviously. Now she winds up at the abortion clinic because she was raped and got pregnant, and she gets raped there. And I think about that woman. You know, we talked about that. It just, and you know this happens, right?
Sure.
But just the numbers tell you that this has happened. And I'm thinking about, what's that woman's life like now? If you could sit down across this table from her and say, what was your thought process when you were raped, got pregnant, went for an abortion, and got raped at the abortion clinic? How horrible must that have been for that poor woman?
Really just the women that are protecting the abortionist. That really ticks me off, to be honest with you.
Right.
I mean, it's just, who would do that? Why would they do that?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of understand if an abortionist is accused, or a man is accused, or any man is accused of this, you understand him defending himself.
Yeah.
Or lying
but
or
not
whatever.
the woman. This is a woman not protecting another woman. We're supposed to stick together here.
But you know what, we made this analogy, I don't know if you brought it up or not one day. It's like when you hear about say a child that's being sexually abused by a stepfather or grandfather or aunt, uncle, father, whatever it might be. And he gets arrested, or this thing gets made public, and in the trial it's discovered that the child's mother knew about it and was covering up. Very often they will turn their back on their own child to protect the husband that's her second husband or whatever, the stepfather of this child that's raping her. And I see the people like you're talking about that work in these abortion clinics is like that.
Yeah, all in the name of money.
All in the name of money or political power or protecting the abortion lobby or whatever it might be. Basically, the way they look at these women that this happens to, they're collateral damage.
I did. I talked to several of them, and they all of these women that worked for an abortionist all covered for them. Even if they were ex-employees, they still covered for them. And I know as soon as I got off the phone with one particular woman, she called the abortionist that she worked for to let him know what was going on. So yeah, I mean, they're still standing up, they're still protecting, and they say that these women are liars.
You even talked to former employees of people that had been convicted.
Yes.
And they're still holding up for this guy.
Yeah.
It's these guys have some sort of bizarre Svengali-like hold over some of these people or something. I don't really fully understand it.
We have a clinic workers website that says don't let your job put you in jail. This is certainly the case in this. You can't do this and get away with it. It's going to come back on you. As a matter of fact, we have a tape from one of Finkel's ex-employees, and she wouldn't talk to the detective on the tape because she knew that she could go down just like he did. So.
Yeah. And we did see situations in which not only did these employees not try to prevent this or step in or warn these women or anything, some of them did things in which they actively participated. And if that's the situation, you're facing potential charges. But I think the bigger thing is these women need to step back a little bit from the political part of this and just say, is this really what I want to do? I want to work in an environment where this pig that I work for is sexually assaulting or sexually abusing or raping or whatever he's doing, taking pictures of them or sharing them with his friends or whatever it might be. Do I really want to protect this guy? Is that really what I want to do? Well, it's because of the stigma of abortion. You got to remember, nationwide, a very small percentage of all women who are victims of sexual assault or rape report them. And most numbers are 10 to 15, maybe 20%. When you add the abortion stigma in there, that number goes down even further because these women don't want to have, there's somebody in their life they don't want to know that they had an abortion. That's why they get raped in these places to begin with. The abortionist knows that. So the nature of the environment where it took place protects the perpetrator. And these women don't feel free to come forward and say anything about it.
Right. The medical board does protect the abortionist, and it is extremely hard to sue them. They protect them through everything that goes on in that clinic.
Yeah, it's the medical board problem that Renee brings up is a very good issue. Most people think that medical boards exist to protect the public. They do not. Medical boards exist to protect the doctor who's accused of something like this. They're there to protect the physicians, and especially in one of these cases. So you might have people on a medical board out here all be doctors, and they'll say, yeah, these guys that work in these abortion clinics are scum, and I'm not surprised that they would rape this woman. But when push comes to shove, he's a doctor and she's a patient, and they're there to protect that doctor.
He said, she said situation.
Right.
Sure.
And then they rally around him. And so that's a big problem. That's a real big problem. I think one of the things that surprised both of us was the role that anesthesia plays in this deal. Unlike other situations where you have medical professionals that sexually abuse patients, and it does happen even with mainstream doctors occasionally, the abortionist has an advantage in that a lot of these patients are under general anesthesia. And also, they're alone with these patients, where most doctors won't be alone in a situation like this. But the role that anesthesia plays here, and you and I talked about this quite a bit when we would see these cases come up. First off, if you're in a general anesthesia, we'd had these women say, I woke up and I could tell something had gone on, but how can I prove this?
Yeah, no,
I can't prove it. And the women who worked there, who know what happened, aren't going to come forward. But then even in the twilight anesthesia, you brought up something that I thought was really important one day under the issue of twilight anesthesia, is that very often in twilight anesthesia, these women would go out, which generally that doesn't happen. Mm-hmm. You made the analogy to going to the dentist, and you've been under twilight anesthesia before having dental work done.
Right.
But you're cognizant of what's going on around you.
Yeah.
But very often these women will talk about, I was kind of cognizant of what was going on, then all of a sudden I go out, right?
Yeah.
That's very unusual for twilight anesthesia.
It doesn't happen.
It doesn't happen very often, but we saw it happen pretty routinely here. And in the interview that we did with the young lady from Arizona, she was saying that, you know, she was cognizant of something was not right and something was going on, and then all of a sudden she's gone.
Yes.
And when she wakes up, she doesn't know what happened to her.
Right.
And so anesthesia plays a big role here that I had never thought about. I didn't even think about it when we were doing the original investigation back in the 90s for Line 5, but it came up this time, and I hadn't picked up on it until you said something about, I find it kind of weird that all these women are going under from twilight anesthesia when that's not generally the way it works, you know.
Right.
And I got to thinking about it when I had my cataract surgery. I was awake while they're cutting on my eyes. You think that's not possible, but I was talking to the guy. The surgeon and I were talking about motorcycles and the Dallas Cowboys football while he was cutting on my eyes. But I was awake. I knew what was going on. And I never went under. I never went totally under. And so this idea that these women are going under twilight anesthesia is significant.
It's purposely done, sure.
Right.
So he can rape or do whatever it is.
Whatever
that
he
does.
wants.
And if they wake up from the anesthesia, then he knocks them out again. There was one victim that woke up 3 different times.
She kept coming to, and he was having sex with her.
Yes.
And he kept, I hate to say it because it was almost comical. She described him hopping because his pants were down. He was hopped over to the counter and got another syringe and hopped back over and knocked her out again.
Right.
And, these things, they're just incredible. But the other part of anesthesia, too, that we need to make the point about is that very often prosecutors won't prosecute these cases for the very reason of anesthesia, even the twilight anesthesia, because these prosecutors, and I've talked to them about this, and they'll say, look, I know that what this woman's saying is true, but if I put her on the witness stand and they say, were you under twilight anesthesia, and she says yes, they're gonna rip her apart. And no jury is gonna convict this guy on the basis of testimony from a woman who had twilight anesthesia.
Right.
So we know it happened, we know she was raped, we know she was sexually assaulted, we know all these things took place, but we're not gonna prosecute because she makes a horrible witness. Now, if one of the other employees wants to say, yeah, I was standing there when it happened, then fine. But that just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that is very unusual versus the rest of the medical community is how often these guys insist on being alone with these women. And they'll say that doesn't go on. I know in the case of Brian Finkel, he told the police, we got him on tape because we have that recording of him talking to the Phoenix Police Department. He told them he was never once alone with a patient. He never touched a patient without his gloves on. And the women that are testifying against him saying no, he was alone with them all the time. His employees said no, he was alone with them all the time. We were sent out of the room very often, and a lot of times he didn't have his gloves on, so he was lying through his teeth.
The other shady things that go on is that they have a lock on the inside of the office where they can lock the door and people outside can't come in. Another shady thing is they will have the victims that they know that they're going to abuse come in after hours where it's just him and the
or they'll go to their house.
Or they go into the office, his office, to conduct business, and that's where he also
he'll get them alone.
Sexually abuses them.
He will get them alone, and we had several of them where he'd go to their house afterward and rape them at their house, or go to their place of work. One woman testified that she had to call the police to get this guy to leave her alone at work. He was showing up at her work.
Right.
He had sexually assaulted her at the clinic, and he came there to assault her again, I guess, but she had to call the police on him. But they do try to isolate these victims. One of them, I think that was one of the abortionists in Mississippi, if I'm not mistaken, where she called for an appointment. He told his nurse to tell her he had no appointments. And so she wouldn't schedule her for an appointment. Then he called her back.
Right, and said that he had one, and it was later in the evening.
Later in the evening to come there. When she showed up, he was there by himself.
Yes.
And he wound up raping her. But anyway, there's a lot of this. This is what you have to understand is, and what's so important for people to understand here, do not apply the standards that you see going on when you go to see a legitimate OBGYN or a legitimate general practitioner or whatever. That's not what happens in abortion clinics. These are totally different environments. They operate by totally different rules. And so all of these things that we're saying, most people would say, well, if I went to the doctor's office and he said, no, I don't want the nurse in here, and he locks the door from the inside, I'm gonna be out of there like my head's on fire. That's right, because you're applying conventional medical standards to this where this sort of thing would never happen. That's not what goes on in abortion clinics. These are not conventional medical environments. I don't know that any of them jumps out more than any of the others. I think one of the ones that we didn't even include in the report because we had some technical problems with the documentation on it, just the sheer volume of things that he had done and the sheer volume, the sheer numbers. But we consistently saw certain things happen. For example, the process was a woman comes forward, accuses one of these guys. If it gets into the public, tons of other women come forward. We had the situation that we talked about in the report with Brian Finkel, the abortionist in Arizona. We had lots of contact with his victims over the years. And it was always, like Renee was talking about earlier, he said, she said situation. So the Maricopa County Sheriff's Department and the District Attorney's Office and the Phoenix Police wouldn't do anything about it. Finally, some of his employees came forward and said, yeah, he was doing this stuff. When this was made public, that he got sued by this woman, or they brought charges against him, within just a few days, 2 or 3 days later, over 100 more women had come forward. I think it was 106, if I remember right. 106 more women came forward and accused him. They filed charges on him on 34 cases, convicted him on 22 of them, and he got, I think, 36 years in state penitentiary. He's there right now. But a sex crimes investigator for the Phoenix Police Department told me that they were convinced that he had at least 1,000 victims over the years, and that the 106 women who came forward were just a tiny fraction of the total number. And this was a thing that we saw repeated time and time again. That was the standard pattern that we saw. And
yeah, I think Brian Finkel is the one that sticks out most to me, just because he was so arrogant and so cocky, and he just didn't think that he was going to ever be caught. And he wore a gun on his hip, and when he was in trial, he would wink at
he was flirting.
the jurors,
right.
And he just was a very arrogant man.
Yeah, when that trial was going on, a friend of mine was there at the trial, and he was calling me back and telling me, give me a kind of a blow-by-blow description of what was going on. And he said when the jury announced they had a verdict, they came back in, they said, you could just see in Finkel's face. It was just like, well, let's get this over with. I got a lunch date. I need to get out of here and go to lunch. And he was stunned when he got convicted. But they said he was actually flirting with one of the female jurors while this was going on. He winked at her when they came back in, and he was stunned. And I guess it's what Renee said, the arrogance of these guys. But, I think, Renee, we need to let people understand, Finkel was not the outlier. This is just the normal. It's just that we had more contact with him.
That's why, yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
We know about him better.
Yes.
But if we'd have sat across the table from any of the other ones
Right.
that we talked about, it would have been the same exact story.
Sure.
He's not any different than they are.
Yeah, no. If we could speak face to face, we would call them a disgusting pig. There's more words that would be said than that, but that would be the start of it.
The words that I might use, we really can't put in here because we'd wind up getting some kind of lawsuit against us. But one of the things I'd want to know, I'd ask one of these animals, is this why you went to medical school? So you could wind up not only being an abortionist, that's bad enough. I mean, that's about as low as you get. You're the low rung in the medical community when you're working in an abortion clinic. But you're an abortionist / rapist. And is this the legacy that you went to medical school to create?
Oh, there were all of them. We had many cases that we could not use due to the fact that we couldn't exactly prove that they were abortionists.
Well, we couldn't get, sometimes we couldn't get a court document. We knew what happened. We knew that they were abortionists. We knew they worked at a Planned Parenthood or whatever, but we couldn't get a court document. We limited our cases that we put out there to stuff that we could actually produce a secular court document or a medical board report or something to document it. We had tons of them that we knew what had happened, and we knew who these people were. Some of them we knew to be abortionists. But unless we could absolutely prove it with a secular document that did not come to us through a pro-life source or a conservative political source or a Christian source or something like that, then we didn't use it.
Yes.
And we've got far more of them, than we do of the ones that we did use. I wish we had a big enough budget to hire all the people that we would need to hire to find all these cases that are out there.
That weren't used.
Right.
Yeah, definitely.
If we could turn those cases over and say, go prove this guy worked at Planned Parenthood. We know he did.
Right.
And we have this person over here saying that he did. We have this pro-lifer who said, I saw him go in and out this Planned Parenthood every day, but we can't prove it. We can't use that pro-lifer's word as proof. So we need to go out and prove this. We had to abandon a lot of these because we just had to move on to the next one. And we didn't have time for Renee to spend 2 weeks looking for one guy. I mean, I can think of, we won't use his name because we didn't prove it, but I can think of one in particular in California that we know he's an abortionist.
Yes.
And the things that he did.
And I've dug. I've tried to prove.
But we know for a fact he's an abortionist. We have pro-lifers saying, yeah, we know he is too. We've seen him go in and out of this place. But we don't have anything to prove it. They cover their tracks very, very well. So if I could do anything different, it would be to find that donor out there who would say, I'll fund you to go identify all these cases. If we could go back and do anything different, that would be it. But I don't even know if we'd have the power to do that. If we could have done that, we would have done it at the time. So.
Yeah.
Very simple. I think Renee would agree. Just simple public awareness. People need to know that this is going on. Right now, women are sitting targets. They walk into these places. They have no idea that this is a possibility. I don't think that the average woman who's thinking about having an abortion, if she looks at the downsides and says, well, this is the downside, this is an upside, this is a downside, I don't think any of them think, I might get raped there. I don't think that ever even crosses their mind.
I don't think it dawns on them at all.
I'd say the message is there's no right way to do a wrong thing. And that's the underlying theme here. The abortion industry wants you to think that even if abortion's wrong, and they'll say, some of them will tell you, oh yeah, we know it's murder. We know we're taking a human life. But this is the right way to do it through legal abortion. There's no right way to do a wrong thing. And that's the bottom line here. And when you accept legalized abortion, you have to take everything that goes along with it. And this is part of what goes along with it.